Have you ever wondered what the Alex Hormozi editing style would look like in 2025? A year ago, this iconic editing style dominated the internet. It was everywhere. Bold colors, snappy emojis, dynamic text. It set the standard for viral content. But video editing has evolved. In the past 12 months, we've seen groundbreaking techniques, 3D camera movements, hyper-polished animations, and styles so clean they feel futuristic. So, what if we gave the Alex Hormozi editing style a major upgrade? In this video, we're recreating this classic editing style with advanced 2025 editing concepts. We're going to be creating 6 high-quality animations that combine the best of Hormozi's original principles with new editing techniques. However, in this video, we're only going to be covering the first 3 of those, where animation 1 is going to contain a modern high-end text animation, animation 2 will have a clean complex graph animation, and animation 3 shows you a dynamic 3D scene. And in the next video, we're going to be covering the remaining 3 animations. So grab your mouse, open up After Effects, and let's bring the Alex Hormozi editing style into 2025. Let's first get started on our first animation here.
Think for themselves, and it's such an easy thing to say and such a hard thing to do.
Over here in After Effects, I've got my raw footage down here and the subtitles over here. If you don't know how we got here, you can check out my Houston Cold video that I made a while back. But let's first handle the text. For this first section, I'm going to start off with the title for the short. These over here are my subtitles, so I'll duplicate one of them and write out "Think Like A." Then I'll duplicate it and write out "Good Investor" and make the font slightly bolder. Luckily, this font called Heading Now has a bunch of options when it comes to the text style. Now we're just going to go ahead and create a text style that we can reuse later on in the project. So for our first text, let's start by adding a drop shadow with a little bit of distance and then add a gradient ramp. Place the start right above our text and the end right below the text. Change the start value to a white and the end value to a light orange. Now down to the main text, let's add a gradient ramp, set the start above our text and the end below our text, and then change the start to a bright red and the end to an orange color. Then we add a drop shadow and set the distance to 15 and change the color to a dark red. Next, we'll add in a light sweep effect, set the center to the center of the text and play around with the direction. Then let's drop the sweep intensity and change the color to a bright orange and simply move it above our drop shadow. Last thing we're going to do is duplicate the light sweep, change it back to white, drop the width, increase the intensity, and simply move the center to the left side. Keyframe it, then move forward and have it come back to the right side. Great, this is a very nice and subtle text effect. Now let's go ahead and add a deep glow to our first text and set the exposure at 0.05. Looks great. Now let's go ahead and add it to the main text too and change the exposure to 0.1. Looks awesome. And the last thing we're going to do for this text to just bring it to life is just add a little animation to it. Keyframe your current position, move forward and add a keyframe again. Move back to the first one and drop them down a bit. Then smoothen it all out in the graph editor and then just keyframe the opacity at 100 and start it at 0. And you'll end up with this clean text animation. Great, we no longer have to worry about any text for the rest of the video. Now I offset them just a bit and finish both of them off by adding this fade out animation from Animation Composer. Now a big part of the Alex Hormozi editing style is the emojis. So we're going to take this to the next level and use icons instead. Since we're talking about investing here, I added in an investment icon. Then to create a background, I added a shape layer. Using my rectangle mask, I drew out a square here and rounded off the corners. Then I added a gradient ramp to it and set the start to a light yellow and the end to a darker orange, and then I added a drop shadow to the icon with a color of darker red and softness of 80. Then I turned them both into 3D layers, and now let's parent the investment icon to the shape layer. Let's go ahead and put the icon over here just next to our text, and now we keyframe the current position, move it forward, drop a little, and let's get into our speed graph and create a spike like this. Then we keyframe our opacity going from 0 to 100. Let's put it under our text and we'll get this animation. Now to move on to our next section, we needed to move off our screen. So we're going to copy and paste the current position over here and move it to where our text next pops up, and just move the icon off the screen to the right side. The last thing I did was just add a light sweep effect to make it look a lot nicer. Now the rest of the section is just text, and since we've already created our text style and animation, this is just going to be easy. Let's select all our text and move it down to where it's supposed to be. Let's start with this one here. We'll bring the text a bit closer like this. I'll go back and copy the effects from this white text style here and paste them on top of the rest of these texts. And for our last text here, I can see that the word hard thing is a special word. So let's duplicate the text layer, delete everything except the words hard thing, then delete the word hard thing from my original text layer and fit it in accordingly. Then change the start to red and the end to orange, and there you go. And we're almost done with this last section. We're just going to add one final icon for this final section. So let's bring in an icon of a guy relaxing and add a shape layer to create the same square we made earlier on. Now let's also add in an icon of a guy working hard and cut them both right around here. Then let's resize it so that they are the same size. Great. Now let's pre-compose them, turn it into a 3D layer, scale it down and place it right here. Then we keyframe the position, move back and have it start down here. Then we're going to move forward and add a keyframe for the current position. Then let's move forward again and move it to the right side here. And finally, let's finish it off at the bottom again. Now we smoothen everything out in the graph editor, then I keyframe the orientation, orient it like so here, orient it like so here, and finally finish it off with a light sweep to make it pop and add a deep glow to bring it to life. And with that being said, that completes our first animation. But let's go ahead and add a quick overlay to make everything look much better. Let's add an adjustment layer, add some Gaussian blur with a blurriness of 20, add some deep glow at 0.3 with some chromatic aberration, and finally add some grain. Lastly, let's select our circle mask, draw out a circle like so, invert the mask, feather it out, and you're gonna get this cool overlay. And this is what your animation looks like after all this.
Good investors fundamentally can think for themselves, and it's such an easy thing to say and such a hard thing to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, yes, it took us quite a minute to get here, but now we no longer need to create anything from scratch. We've got textiles, animations, and a bunch of different things that we can reuse later on the project. Now for the editors watching this, I have a quick question for you. Did you know that you can master Premiere Pro, master After Effects, and learn 8 different editing styles in just 60 days? Ultimate Editors is a program that I have been working on that gives editors just like you access to more than 300 plus courses on Premiere Pro, After Effects, and 8 different editing styles. You get 50 plus Premiere Pro courses to teach you the fundamentals and advanced techniques, 50 plus After Effects courses to help you create stunning animations like the ones in this video, 100 plus short form editing courses to teach you editing styles like Devin Jatho, Houston Cold, By Maximize, and Ali Abdal, 100 plus long form editing courses to teach you editing styles like Isaac, Iman Gaji, and even my own high-end editing style. Plus, we include a 30-day land a client masterclass where you're gonna learn how to build a personal brand, post content that attracts clients, and secure your first client in just 30 days. And that's not all. Our program also provides weekly group calls, editing competitions, and exclusive presets and plugins. With over 400 plus students already creating mind-blowing animations, this is your 60-day plan to becoming a high-quality editor. So if you're ready to level up your skills and join a community of like-minded editors, check out Ultimate Editors. The link is gonna be in the description below. And let's make you a master video editor in the next 60 days. So with that being said, it's now time to get into our second animation. This one's gonna be interesting.
By the time you have consensus where everyone's like, that's a good investment, it probably isn't.
The first thing I did was create a background by adding in a solid, adding a gradient ramp, then changing the type to radial ramp, and moving my start down to the center. Then change the center to this dark orange color and the end to a darker orange. Then let's add a shape layer, draw out this square here, then let's round off the corners, let's add a gradient ramp, set the start to a gray and the end to a dark orange. Then we're gonna add a light sweep, put it in the center, and make it slightly bigger. Great, so we now have a box. How nice. Then let's add in a shape layer, and using our pen tool, we create a straight line with a stroke of 2. Then let's add the trim paths function, drop the end to 0, keyframe the start at 0%, move it to the beginning, and then change the start to 100%. This will draw it out like so. Then let's duplicate it and place it down here, and we have a graph. Now to add the grid, I add an adjustment layer and add the grid effect to it. Change the blending mode to screen, and play around with the corner until I get these straight lines. Let's drop the border to 1 and drop the opacity to 30%. Finally, let's grab the rectangle mask and draw out a mask like so and bump up the feather just a bit. Perfect. Now let's get to work on our animations. Let's add in yet another shape layer. Then using the pen tool, I zoom in and draw out a slowly increasing line with points on our graph like this. Then I remove the fill and change the stroke color to red. And let's do the same thing from the top to the bottom for a line that is decreasing. Remove the fill and change the color to blue. And now to animate them, we add a trim paths function, keyframe the start at 0, move it back and bring it up to 100. Great. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the other line and just offset them a little bit like so. Now we're going to quickly make our third line by just duplicating this layer and moving it over to here. Then let's use our pen tool to move these points around and randomize them, then change the color to orange. Perfect. We have a graph and line animations. Now let's make them all look better. We add a deep glow to this line, this one, and this one. Now that our animation is complete, let's go ahead and add in our text. First, I'll select all these layers and turn them into 3D layers. Then I'm going to use my move tool to move everything to the left a bit. Now I'm going to add in a shape layer, draw out this line and add some dashes to it and animate it with the trim paths to get this line reveal animation. Now let's add a text layer and write out peak information. Then let's scale it down and place it over here. Now to spice things up a bit more, let's go ahead and add in a subtle reveal animation to it. Let's keyframe the current position, then move back and move the text to the right side. Let's keyframe the opacity, move back and drop it to 0. Then let's smoothen out the animations in the speed graph. Finally, let's duplicate the layer, drop it down a little, and write out a longer paragraph. Then just choose a lighter font for this and scale it down like so. Perfect. Now we select all three and duplicate them and move them forward a bit, but drop them down here. Let's change the shape of the line and change the title to Too Late and change the description to something else. And for our last scene here, let's once again duplicate our text and write out peak affirmation and change the description, and finally duplicate the second set and place it here. Finally, with our animation complete, let's go ahead and add in our camera movement and create a few different scenes. Let's right click and add a single node camera. Now, let's keyframe the position and bring it back. Move forward and have it zoom in quite a bit. Smoothen out this movement in the graph editor, and this is scene 1. Now let's cut here and start our scene by keyframing the position over here where the text is, and then moving our keyframe back to the beginning and moving forward, dropping the camera down to the second text. Let's smoothen out this movement, and this is scene 2. For scene 3, let's duplicate the first camera movement and place it right here for a quick zoom in. Then for scene 4, let's just move the same movement animation over to here so that it animates from the top text to the bottom one. And there you go. The entire animation is complete, so let's add a few more effects to top it off. We add an adjustment layer, apply the grain effect at an intensity of 0.3, and add the posterized time effect at a frame rate of 20. Then let's copy the same effect we added in the intro and add it here. And lastly, we add one last adjustment layer and the CC lens effect and change the size to 100 and convergence to 10. And after all that, this is what our animation finally looks like.
Too late. And by the time you have consensus where everyone's like, that's a good investment, it probably isn't.
Now with our first and second animation complete, it's finally time to get into our third animation. This one is all about 3D layers.
Like, it's already inflated and it's above what its intrinsic value is.
For this animation, the first thing I'll do is add in my text by copying the first two texts we made in animation 1 and pasting them here. Then let's write out it's already been and write out mispriced. Then let's change the start color to a bright green and change the end color to a yellow. Change the drop shadow to a green, and there you go. Now let's add in our 3D money icon. Let's start by adding in a shape layer and drawing out a circle. Then let's change its color so that we can see it. Now let's download a money icon that fits this color palette and place it right here. Let's scale down just a bit. And now let's pre-compose both these layers. Let's set them both to 3D layers and change the renderer to advanced. Then we'll add in our second view and change it to custom view 1. Now let's go down to geometry and add some extrusion for our shape. Now let's change our fill to a different green like this one over here, and let's parent the icon to the shape layer under it. Let's scale it down, and now let's animate the movement. First we move it over here and keyframe the position and orientation. Now let's move forward and orient it slightly different. Then move back to the beginning and have it start down here. Then let's move forward and have it come over here and rotate slightly different. And finally move forward once again and finish it off up here in the center with a 360-degree rotation. Now to make this way smoother, I'll use my pen tool to add a point right here and drag it down to here. Then let's just smoothen this point out like this, and let's also smoothen out the entry curve over here. Let's play around with the speed graph to make it all more seamless. And now to do the 360-degree rotation at the end, I'll add a keyframe to the center for 180 degrees so that it fully rotates around. Then we're going to create this smooth shape in the speed graph here. And now back outside our pre-comp, let's add a deep glow and set the tint to green. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and make this animation just a little bit smoother by duplicating the layer, adding in the echo effect, and then let's set the number of echoes to 9, set the decay to 0.5, set the starting intensity to 0.9, and then we're going to add some radial blur and change the type to zoom. And let's go ahead and place our original 3D object on top of it. Then we're going to remove the deep glow from the second duplicate. Now for this section over here, we're going to start by creating a background by adding in a solid layer. Then let's add a gradient ramp and set the start to a dark green and the end to a black color. Now finally, let's take our circle mask and draw out a little circle here. Keyframe the mask expansion, bring it all the way back, then expand the mask all the way. Finally, let's smoothen it out, place the layer under my 3D animation, and we get this. Great, let's now go ahead and make some arrows flying up the screen. First, let's import an icon of an arrow, then let's add the gradient ramp, then set the start to a green color and the end to a black. Now let's add a light sweep effect, then let's change the color to a bright green. Then let's keyframe the current position and move forward and bring it all the way to the top of the screen. Then create a velocity spike in the speed graph. Great, now we have an arrow that flies up. So let's duplicate this a bunch of times, randomize it like so, and now I'll change the anchor points of each of these so that they all start in a random place. Finally, I'm going to randomize them a little bit more, and there we go. Now let's add an adjustment layer, add a deep glow to it, and pre-compose it with the arrows. Then let's take our rectangle mask and draw one over our pre-composition and feather it out like so. Maybe resize it to here. And with this being said, this completes our first 3 animations out of the 6 animations. And this is what our first 3 animations altogether look like.
Good investors fundamentally can think for themselves, and it's such an easy thing to say and such a hard thing to do. By the time you have all the information to make a perfect decision, it's too late. And by the time you have consensus where everyone's like, that's a good investment, it probably isn't, because it's already been mispriced, because it's already inflated and it's above what its intrinsic value is.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we mentioned before, this is only part 1 of a 2-part series, so stay tuned for the next episode in which we're going to go through the remaining 3 animations. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys actually learned something from this video. Stay tuned for part 2. Check out Ultimate Editors, and God bless all of you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video, but in the meantime, you can enjoy one of these 2 videos over here. Both of them are very, very good.